2+ million members, which is true, but the community started with one member, which is me.
Yeah.
In the summer of 2014. I was burnt out from my previous experience. I love building, but at the same time, I needed to recharge. During those 2 months, I started considering different things. I tried to help some of my friends who were building in startups. I also started teaching product in a very unofficial capacity. And I realized that product is something that I've been doing my entire life, even though I've never been called a product manager, because my titles are always been founder or CEO, but there's a lot of product management in founders and CEOs.
Our guest today was Carlos Gonzalez de Villambrosia, founder and CEO of Product School, the global leader in product management training. Carlos, what did we discuss today?
Talked about how to build products, how to build companies in Silicon Valley, how to stay alive and mentally healthy along the way, and some of the failures and lessons learned in between.
Carlos shared his journey of building Product School. We went through the entire evolution of the company starting from 2014. An amazing journey all the way to now, where Product School has 2 million people in the community, 20,000 alumni. We discussed his journey as a manager, how he evolved as a leader, as a manager, what makes him a great CEO and founder. This episode will be super useful for founders, entrepreneurs, everyone who is excited about education and product management. Hi everyone, yet another episode of nFactorial podcast. Today coming to you from Marin County, the other side of Golden Gate Bridge. Today we have on the program an amazing guest, Carlos Gonzalez de Villambrosia, founder and CEO of Product School, global leader in product management training. Carlos, welcome to the program.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for finding time. Let's start from the banger. Where is Product School now? Just share some metrics just to kind of set the stage.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, Product School is the global leader in product training. We've been around for over 9 years now, and we have a community of over 2 million members. We offer training in product management as well as product marketing. We train some of the largest companies in the US, such as JP Morgan, Walmart, McKinsey, or Microsoft. And we've trained thousands of people who are either transitioning into product management as well as existing product managers who want to transition into a more senior role.
Got it. How many alumni do you have?
At this point, it's over 20,000.
Amazing. When it comes to evolution, sort of, let's talk about Product School in 2023. When it comes to you, I saw that you have 3 certificates at the moment. What would, if we were to dissect the key features of Product School, what would they be?
Well, in 2023,
yeah.
Product School is a community, first and foremost. Over 90% of our features or resources are absolutely free and available for everybody. And that's something that I like to say first, because that was always my intention, to level the playing field and help more people learn about how to build better products, digital products in this case. So most well-known resources, I would say, are our conferences. We do have 3 conferences every year. It's called ProductCon. We do it in San Francisco, New York, and London. We have over 100 events every year. They're all absolutely free. And the speakers that participate in this type of events and conferences are all top product leaders working at companies such as Google, Netflix, Airbnb, Silicon Valley companies who've been building some of the best products in the world used by millions of people. And that is something really important, because when I was a student, I not always had the best experience from teachers. And I always say that our teachers are not teachers, they are practitioners, and they are teaching because they want to give back. They wish they had something like this when they were breaking into product.
Mm-hmm. If we were to describe how it works, let's maybe do a deep dive in. Let's say I'm an aspiring product manager. I sign up for one of your products. Let's say I sign up for a part-time training, which is, I would say, 6 weeks or so. I do it twice a week. What do I do during those live sessions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are a couple of things that I wanted to change from my own experience as a student in the traditional education system. Well, first of all, I'm a lifelong learner. I believe in the concept of investing in myself to grow in my career the same way I like to have time to invest in my own physical health or invest in my family, in my friends. I never understood why we are supposed to study full-time until our mid-20s and then at some point become full-time professionals for the rest of our life and not continue doing a little bit of everything if that's what you want. That's what I want. So first I wanted to change the format of training, and most of our students already have full-time jobs already. So the best way for them to continue investing in themselves is to do it on weeknights or weekends so they can keep their full-time job as well as any other commitments. The second piece is doing it online. There's no secret that online learning works, especially during the pandemic. That was the only type of learning.
But you started doing it online even before.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I think one of the benefits of doing this online, in addition to the flexibility and the convenience, is access to the best. Anyone now can access some of the best product leaders who are mostly based in Silicon Valley, working at some of the companies that we mentioned before, and you can be anywhere in the world. So now there is no reason why you can not learn from the absolute best instead of limit your learning to the local maximum. Mm-hmm. And then the third piece is to make sure that these trainings are as practical and as connected to employment as possible. I remember during my degree, my parents, some of my teachers would say, "Don't worry, kid, this will be good for you in the future. You might not know now, but like just keep going, just keep reading, just keep passing the exams." And I did it. But I'm still waiting to know how some of the things that I learned 15 years ago apply to the real world. So we do this over 6 weeks, and the content is extremely practical and it's super hands-on, and it includes how to get a job or how to get a promotion, because ultimately the way we want to measure success is not just based on the student happiness. It's really the return on investment. It's how were you able to leverage this training to either get a new job or a new promotion.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to one of the features of your programs is full immersion. So and the final project. Mm-hmm. What do they start working on it on week one, or is it they start in the middle of the program?
When I started product school, a lot of people, a lot of haters would say you cannot teach product management because in a way you need to be a visionary. You need to be born with certain skills. There's too much art to that. It is hard to structure, and I don't think that's true. I think there's definitely an art, maybe, and there's some things that you can only acquire with experience, but there's definitely a lot of hard skills and frameworks that have been proven that you can learn and leverage. And so I wanted to create something as practical as possible. And building for me as a product manager doesn't mean coding, doesn't mean designing, doesn't mean selling. It means being in the middle of all of those three things and empowering those teams, creating the artifacts that they need to be more efficient at coding, designing, or selling. So what does that mean? When in product management, typically at the very beginning, it means identifying the opportunity. It's validating your hypothesis or someone else's hypothesis with the market, talking to customers, doing some competitive research, and there are different ways you can do that. There are frameworks that have been proven. Qualitative research, quantitative research, data analytics. There are different ways you can do that. And that is something that someone has to do. Maybe in small companies, the CEO or one of the founders is wearing that hat, but eventually as the company grows, you are going to need someone who is leading that. And product teams tend to be at the frontier of this type of what's next? How are we going to build something and why? So that is an important artifact. As we move down the product life cycle, you have to structure this hypothesis, this vision into a more consolidated strategy. Like, how are we going to drive business outcomes? And how can we put it in a way that other people are going to buy in and push in that same direction? So defining a clear product strategy, breaking down that strategy into specific objectives. We typically use the OKR system, objective key results. There are other ways you can measure progress for your strategy, and then going one level deeper, going into the roadmap. How are you going to make those objectives tangible initiatives for your teams to start executing against, and how are you going to measure the success of those specific initiatives, and how long and how much effort is that going to take, right? So we're getting more into the nitty-gritty, but like product managers are responsible not just for the vision and the strategy, they're also responsible for bringing down those ideas and making them happen. If we go even deeper, we need to break down those initiatives into specific PRDs, product requirement documents, and instructions, right, to collaborate with engineers, and instructions to collaborate with designers, and prototypes or wireframes for everybody to try to co-create this, but also do it in a relatively agile way, so we can save a lot of our engineers and designers time before they move into the coding or designing phase. That's a lot of the kind of secret sauce of successful products is attributed to the product managers, because they do a lot of that pre-work with their teams to make sure that when we are building, there's a really good rationale. And by the way, even if there's a good rationale and for whatever reason an initiative or even a strategy doesn't work, they are also responsible for iterating and tweaking things to make it work long term. So it's another big part of what product managers have to do and build as engineers and designers code and design, which is defining the success metrics and coordinating with typically marketing and sales team for the launch of specific features, initiatives, products, and then assuming that by the time you launch, you are not done. It's just the beginning of a whole new cycle. So you have to be constantly comparing those success metrics with the actual metrics and deciding what to do next. And some of those decisions are about iterating that existing product. Other times the decision is to shut down something because it's really not worth pursuing. So that is a lot of the science behind the scenes that sometimes people cannot see when they expect that a product manager is suddenly going to have a shower idea and decide, this is what we're going to do, now let's raise the troops and make sure that everybody's coding and designing according to my vision.
When it comes to, if we were to segment your customer base, who are your students?
It has evolved. Because when I started the company, most of our students were software engineers or people with a technical background that wanted to become product managers. They wanted to stop coding and leverage that technical background in a different way. That's actually my case. I studied computer science and I consider myself technical enough. But that has evolved a lot. Part of it is how the market has evolved too. Because it's true, like back in the day, there was this myth around, in order to be a good product manager, you need to know how to code. You need to be very technical because you need to earn the respect of your engineers. And to some extent, there's definitely value in empathizing with engineering teams, but learning how to code is not the only way to do that. So while having a technical background can be helpful, we've seen that now that's the role of product manager has evolved, hence the professional background of our students. Now we have a lot of people that come from business backgrounds such as consulting, finance, we have marketers, we have salespeople. So at the end of the day, the way I see product is you're in the middle of a lot of other teams. Engineers, designers, sales come to mind, but data, customer success, and others are also part of this ecosystem. So it's almost impossible to be great at everything. Product managers typically come from one of those groups. They tend to be great at one of them, but then they have to become good enough at the rest. And that's part of what we try to teach, and that's what we are seeing in the market. There are companies that are still indexing on hiring very technical PMs, mainly because the products are very, very technical, so there's a case for that. But for most products these days, having a technical background is not a requirement.
When it comes to the age, if let's say I'm a fresh college graduate, would you recommend me signing up for a course, or would you suggest me to first, spend 5 years, focusing on my craft, working in I don't know, consulting or finance or engineering, and then pursuing PM?
There are very few purebred product managers.
Yeah.
Meaning very few people get their first product management job right after college.
Except maybe with an exception of APM program at Google, which was very small but special for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in general, what we've seen is people spending at least 3 years working in a different function, typically engineering or design or marketing, becoming really good at it, and then transitioning into product. It's not impossible to start in product, but it's even harder just because the bar is very, very high. And you referred, you mentioned the Associate Product Manager program that Google created back in the day.
Yeah. Marissa Mayer created one. Yeah.
VP of Product, legendary VP of Product at Google.
She used to like green light every single APM.
She did that, and I think it was early days, like 2003, 2004. Kudos to her, because she saw this opportunity, and the problem is that the market wasn't producing enough product managers, right? There was no product school. Universities weren't really teaching this topic. Still to this day, a lot of universities don't even cover product. But anyway, so her solution was, well, let's identify some of our current Googlers with potential and train them to become PMs. And most of these people were actually engineers. It's a very exclusive program. So sure, if someone has the opportunity to join one of these programs, that's fantastic, because in a way they are paying you to learn, and then they are also giving you a PM job if you succeed. But that's very, very rare. Now more companies are creating their own APM programs, which I believe it's a good thing. But we're also seeing other options for people to break into product.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Let's say I graduated college at age 22. I spent 3-4 years doing finance or engineering, and then I decide to, now having learned the craft, now I decide to branch out to product management. What's my ideal journey from that intention, from that decision, all the way to getting a job as a PM at, let's say, Uber or Facebook?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you an answer that you might not like, but it's very typical in product, mm-hmm. which is it depends.
Yes.
And let me explain why. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of students who come with that type of question. They're like, okay, I really want to become a product manager at top company, right? Google, Uber, Airbnb, and that's great. And maybe they can do it. Part of what we do is to show them different options. And maybe after that exploration, they realize that there might be a better option for them. Because that these places are very competitive. And also they look great from the outside, but they're not always great from the inside for people who are working in product there. Anyway, here's the typical journey. When you're joining a small startup, there are not too many product managers. You don't need them. It's one of the founders who's wearing that hat. It's only until you have at least 3 to 5 software engineers when someone says, okay, wait, we need to hire someone full-time to focus on product because the founder is too busy doing sales or fundraising or operations or one of 1,000 things. But at the very beginning, product equals company. Gets to a point where company is much bigger than product. And I think that's the key moment. But there are very few opportunities for people to join an early stage startup as a product manager. That first full-time PM tends to be an existing employee who's been showing a lot of potential and is able to now continue in a different capacity.
Founder's classmate.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just complicated. There are not too many opportunities. Yeah. It's more likely to find your first PM job in a medium to large organization that has many more of those roles. And I actually think it's not a bad idea either, because the way they are thinking about product is probably more structured. Like they have different levels of seniority. They have some products that achieve product market fit, which means, they are not supposed to reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. Personally, I think there are pros and cons with that, because as someone who comes from the startup world, I also think there's something fascinating about joining a company before product market fit. Yeah. The reality is that job description is going to be very different, because when you are before product market fit, you are doing product plus. You're basically building, you're doing whatever it takes to make sure that someone starts using or hopefully buying your product. When you join a company that has product market fit, then you are mostly focused on optimizing certain things that are already working. Mm-hmm. Which is like different mindset that requires different skill sets. And then within the product team, there are a lot of other roles. It's not just about product managers. We're seeing product marketers, we're seeing business analysts, technical program managers. So it's important for people as they obviously have a big goal, and you're never going to achieve more than what you dream of. But at the same time, understand that there are different steps to that dream, as well as different paths that might also lead to a different type of dream.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, and when it comes to the kind of the suggested route, what do you suggest to the 26-year-old? Like, what should they? Let's say they went to your webinars. They now have a clear goal. They go through your program, they get a certificate, they become part of a community. Now they have they talk, they maybe meet up, they have some meetups. When should they start applying with a reasonable chance of getting in?
Yeah, so as soon as possible, because it takes time and it's a little bit of a numbers game, and you are going to get a lot of no's in order to get to a yes. So you might not be fully qualified, but the sooner you start, the better. And technically, when are you fully qualified, right? It's like starting a company. Like you have to figure this out as you go in a way. So we ask the students to treat themselves as a product. And what that means is, well, once you already got certified, once you have certain skill sets, you have certain years of experience in some other capacity, and you really want to start having those type of conversations, it's important to identify companies that might be a good fit for you based on your own criteria, not based on where you live or based on where your parents want you to work at, based on your own criteria, and make sure that criteria is realistic. So to your point before, maybe Google is not the best fit for you, or maybe it is, but let's look at these other companies that are working in specific industries, maybe that you have experience in, or maybe work at other, or maybe roles within product that are not just product manager, that you might be a better fit to. And put together at least a list of 50 companies. Once you have those companies and from the bottom of your heart you believe that you are a good fit for them as well as they are a good fit for you, then you start reaching out. And then you of course have the classic approach of cold calling or cold messaging, and there's no shame in that. Do it, why not? There's nothing to lose. However, it's not very likely to work. Why? Because everybody's doing it, and if you also don't have enough credentials, why would someone want to respond to you? So we ask people or students to spend the same way they're spending time qualifying companies for themselves. Once you identify those companies, spend time identifying individuals in those companies that can give you more insights about the opportunity and hopefully at least give you the opportunity to talk to them. What do I mean by that? Well, LinkedIn these days is a great source. There are others, but in this case, I love LinkedIn. You can see literally who's working in product. You can see who you have in common with some of these people, and try to generally reach out to these people in a specific way. Not like, hi, I'm applying for this job and I would like to work here. Can you grab coffee with me? Well, maybe something along the lines of, hey, yes, I saw that your company is hiring, and I know that you are actually working in this specific product that you are hiring product manager for. I noticed we have so and so in common. I've been following you for some time, and I realized that you wrote this article that really resonated with me because so and so. Obviously, I'm not trying to ask for a job right off the gate, but I would love to have the opportunity to connect with you and learn a bit more about the opportunity to see if this can be a good fit for me. Yes, it takes more time. Maybe the whole research for that particular individual takes at least 15 minutes, if not 30. But it's worth it because you're taking more of a sniper approach, and the response rate is going to be much, much higher. So let's assume you go through that phase of really identifying a company and individuals in those companies that could be interested in you, because it's important to consider, why would this person want to talk to me, right? Some of them will do it just because they will want to give back, but if you can find ways to also grab attention in a way that is beneficial for them, that's going to help. Anyway, once that happens, your resume or your LinkedIn profile or your whole online brand has to be positioned in a product way. What do I mean by that? Well, if you haven't worked in product yet, it's important to talk about the milestones that you accomplished in a way that a product person would appreciate. If you come from an engineering background, talking in a very technical language might be helpful for another engineering job, but not for a product job. So if you can talk about the revenue impact, if you can talk about the productivity increase, if you can talk about some of your leadership skills and how you were able to get buy-in from other people or influence certain decisions, that's product language. That's going to resonate much more with a recruiter or a product person. So there's a certain science to that, and we work with the students to make sure that their whole presence is appealing to someone who is recruiting for product. Once we get to that phase, the goal is not to get a job. The goal is to get a conversation. You have to treat yourself as a product, and in this product, there's like a certain life cycle. And as you get volume, you get acquisition of companies. Then you want to activate those companies by talking to the right individuals, and then hopefully having a conversation with those individuals. In that conversation, it's important to prepare to make sure that the goal is, again, not to get it's to get a job, it's to get another conversation, hopefully with someone else in that company. So build that momentum, know that this is a process, know that most of the things that you do, even if they're perfect by the book, they're still not going to work. But at the same time, if you have that perspective, you're playing a numbers game over the long period of time, it's going to work. Statistically, it has many more chances to work. Mm-hmm. Eventually, you're going to get to a phase where someone will want to see how you build and how you think. And that's why I think that, in our case, the training, like building a feature, showing the different artifacts that you were able to create to really get to that point is really powerful. If you've done other things at your previous company, that's great. Like, just treat it as part of your portfolio. This is another myth that happens in product management. Product managers can show their work. Mm-hmm. The same way engineers can have a portfolio and a GitHub account, or designers can have a portfolio and show their Dribble account or Behance account, product managers also build. And they could have their own portfolio. They can show how they created that strategy. They can show how they create a roadmap. They can show how they create a PRD or a wireframe, or what is their process around validating a hypothesis, defining success metrics, and getting certain things done. I think it's important to speak from a place of authenticity. And in a certification program, you get to build all of that. Hopefully, in your work, you also got to participate in some of those artifacts, even if you weren't the leader. Like, at some point, you're going to need to show that you know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It is not about connections. Like, yes, maybe connections can get you a conversation, but nobody's going to gift you a job without really being able to show that you can add value, especially these days. So in the hiring process, we've seen number of interviews anywhere from 2 to 8, because this is even the most entry-level product role requires experience and requires a lot of validation, because you can be an accelerator for a lot of people, or you can also be a bottleneck. So you might want to they might want you to interact with people in engineering, people in design, people in product, just to ensure that you can understand the different languages and be a good fit for all of them. And then as you go down the interview process, then eventually it's time to negotiate the terms, right? And one thing that I always discuss with my students is be very clear about your priorities. Are you looking for the highest paid job of your life right now? Or are you looking for an opportunity to prove yourself and go into this product journey? And it really depends, right? Your family situation, so many different variables go into this. But I think it's important to do this exercise and figure out, what are you trying to optimize for? Because if you have the opportunity to be flexible with economic terms, with the title, then I think that's going to give you more options to get your foot in the door, to maybe start as a technical product manager, or maybe join a company that is not paying you as much cash, but maybe is paying you more equity, or maybe it's a company that is going to give you an opportunity for you to really learn more than a company where you are just going to be optimizing a button. So it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer, but this is what I mean by treating yourself like a product and going through the entire process step by step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. So it's clear what your product is. It's clear who your customers are, and it's impressive. You are 2 million plus strong, 20,000 alumni. Let's go into at least my personal one of my favorite chapters, which is the history of product school. Let's start from 2014, how you started it, and then maybe go year by year and show the evolution of your company.
Well, man, you said 2+ million members, which is true, but the community started with 1 member, which is me.
Yeah.
In the summer of 2014. Mm-hmm. So I started a previous company in education, And it was a fascinating experience for me. I learned a lot, but unfortunately I didn't achieve the economic success that I expected. So I went through this dark phase where I got a little lost. I was burnt out from my previous experience. I love building, but at the same time I needed to recharge. And my wife told me, well, take 2 months off. You will figure it out, no worries. And I was like, okay, well, thank you, but I can't turn this brain off sometimes. And during those 2 months, I started considering different things. I tried to help some of my friends who were building startups. I also started teaching a product in a very unofficial capacity, just because I love it and it was a good way for me to stay relatively active. And I realized that product is something that I've been doing my entire life, even though I've never been called a product manager, because my titles are always been founder or CEO, but there's a lot of product management in founders and CEOs. And yeah, I went to business school and I went to engineering school, but none of those two places really taught me anything about product. And I found that sweet spot right in between. A product school is that combination of an engineering school and a business school that tries to be as specific as possible. And I started dreaming with this idea, and I realized that one of the reasons why I burnt out in my previous startup is because I was trying to optimize for way too many people. I raised a lot of money very quickly, and the expectations for a lot of the people who gave me that money was growth at all cost. And next time you know, yes, I have certain metrics going up and to the right in terms of number of users, but the retention metrics weren't that good, the revenue metrics weren't that good. And now I was in this position where I was spending a lot of my time trying to raise more money. I was spending also a lot of time with attorneys, with accountants, and at some point I look back and it's like, I'm a product person, I love to build, and I'm not spending as much time as I want to with my team, with my customers. So it was a good lesson learned for me to redefine my definition or define happiness in a more authentic way. I think by living in Silicon Valley, I got trapped into the standard definition around company valuation, team size, $1 million in the bank or on paper. I was rich on paper, right? But I didn't really have any good liquidity event. So based on all of these learnings, I decided to bootstrap and treat myself as a product and create a training that I wish I had when I was starting. And so I was the first instructor. I started organizing some events.
This was summer 14.
This is summer 14.
When you made a decision
I made a decision, I'm going to start something. I don't know how big it's going to be, but this is my true passion. I want to create a solution to my own problem.
Correct. You don't want to be featured on TechCrunch, but you went back to the more intrinsic motivation, which is, let me build something I actually want myself.
Yep. And it's funny because now I'm on a podcast, but my goal wasn't to be on a podcast. It was like, I'm going to build something that I really care about, that I think I can be great at. And I also want to make enough money to live off this. I don't know if this is going to turn into a unicorn or a public company, but I want to try something that is optimized for myself, for my own happiness, and then see how it goes. So that's what I did. I treated the company as a product. I was the product. So I started organizing. Well, first of all, I had this idea of teaching product management, but I also didn't have any customers. So summer of 2014, I rented a shared desk in a co-working space. There were 2 other people on the desk.
Do you remember where it was?
Yeah, I was in Soma, in San Francisco. Not a very pretty area. I paid, I think it was $150 for 1/3 of a desk. It's still crazy expensive. It was 1/3 of a desk. That's all I could afford at that point. And I just needed to get out of the house and start feeling that I'm in a place where I'm going to build. So my first move was to start testing demand. And the way I tested demand was organizing events, free events in the other co-working spaces, where I would be the speaker. I would create a 1-2 hour long workshop on different topics related to product management.
How did you get attendees?
Oh, well, because it was free.
And did you put a poster on the door? Or?
So here's how I did it. I went, San Francisco, Bay Area has a lot of co-working spaces. So I would go to each of them and I would offer them to give a free talk. Like I was always thinking about what is in for the person who's going to give me the free space. And business for these co-working spaces is to rent desks to other people.
And you'll bring them traffic.
So I will be bringing literally traffic.
Correct.
To their space at a time that space is going to be empty anyway. So on a Wednesday or Thursday in the evening, I would say 6:30 p.m. after work, let me just organize this. And I would post these events online on different sites such as meetup.com, Eventbrite, and other email listings that are free. So free marketing, free event, free space, sounds very free for everybody.
How many rejections did you get, like in the early days, like when you pitched this to different co-working spaces?
Very few.
Very few. So actually, most of them agreed.
Because the value prop was it's almost a no-brainer for them, right? That you have the space that is not being used, and that's going to bring you at least 50 people.
Yeah.
And hopefully, some of these people also find value in your co-working and decide to rent space.
Wonderful.
So, win-win from that perspective. Now the challenge is, how am I going to bring that 50 plus people, and then how I'm going to ensure that these people are qualified enough for me as well. So they are not only going to follow me to the next co-working space for another free event.
Will you give yourself? Will you, let's say, would you give yourself a week to actually promote the event? Let's say when you're booking a space, are you booking like a week or two in advance?
Around 2 weeks, 3 weeks. When you have no safety net. When this has to work,
correct,
you have no time to waste. So I was on a mission. I'm still on a mission. Even though 9 years later, I don't want to lose that fire, that startup DNA that I think helped us at the beginning, even though we had nothing. And people resonated with the value prop, because there were a lot of events, mostly for founders, around how to raise more money and how to pitch ideas, but there wasn't really anything for product managers, which is like the second line of action behind the founder. There was no platform for them to share that knowledge. And so at the very beginning, I was that speaker, but a few months later, I started inviting other product leaders from amazing companies to come and share some of their learnings, and surprisingly, a lot of them said yes. So I started building this momentum. Of course, there were some people that would follow me from co-working to co-working. They would never pay. They weren't interested in taking a course, but they were like, I love this so much, I have free time. I'm like, okay, sure. But I was able to start being pickier around who I want in the room. Like I got to a point where I could pack pretty much any room with at least 50 people, because the topics were also very interesting. So I was A/B testing my topics.
Yeah.
I was teaching how to create wireframes with different tools. I was teaching how to run A/B testing, A/B test experiments. I was teaching how to create a roadmap. So different modules of the entire program.
Everything you learned as a CEO in a previous company.
Exactly.
As a founder, yeah.
And from there, during the networking part, I was able to have those conversations and get to know people in person, one person at a time. Because when you are really, really small, yes, it's good to dream about how you're going to get your first 1,000 customers, but first you need to get your first customer, and then your first 10, and then your first 100. And maybe some of these tactics don't scale as well, but at the very beginning, I was very focused on doing something that doesn't scale, and really get to know each of my students. That's how I did it. I was also very active online on different discussion forums, such as Quora or Reddit. They have different subreddits or threads around product management.
Quick question.
Yes.
When you organized your first event, you had 50 attendees. Where did they come from? Which channels worked?
So this was San Francisco. Those attendees were all local. Most of them now we're talking 2014, technical people that wanted to learn more about how to branch out of engineering and become more of a product manager. So it was mostly a technical audience.
But did they find out about you from a poster, from Meetup link?
Meetup, Eventbrite.
All of it. Got it.
Some of the co-working spaces would do their own internal marketing for the startups working there. So that was mostly it. I still didn't have a big personal brand. I was also sharing on LinkedIn. I was also sharing on these other discussion forums, but I was basically tapping into other platforms because I didn't have my own platform. And I think that was a huge learning for me. I can start by leveraging what exists without me trying to spend too much time building the platform, building the website, and then going out there and testing if it works. I was just testing as we go. So these online discussion forums were also very helpful because a lot of people asking questions about How can I break into product management? I come from a technical background. Do I need an MBA to become a product manager? What are the key skills? Like, there was a lot of, I was able to understand patterns and meet the people. Because in those discussion forums, you can see who they are. They have a LinkedIn profile. So my approach to these ask questions was, I'm going to add value with my answer. This is not going to be a sales pitch. Say, well, if you want to know everything, come take my course. No, let me address your question in a thoughtful way. And then what I would do is I would follow up with them offline. I would find them on LinkedIn, or maybe I would DM them directly on Quora. Like, hey, I'm the one who answered your question, and I'm hosting an event related to this topic, or I see that we're both in San Francisco, would love to grab coffee with you to try to help, as well as learn more about what other questions you have and what's kind of behind this. So it was a win-win, because I was able to do some discovery while helping another person. Very, very unscalable. But at the same time, if I did my own unit economics analysis, my goal wasn't to become a billion-dollar company. My goal was to be profitable, and my burn was so low, right? It's $150 a month for a third of a desk in a co-working space. Everything else, I'm doing it for free, and I'm getting it for free. It's just my time. So my MVP, my minimum viable product, was, once I have enough demand and enough people in the community who are already getting value from me and get to know me, they trust me relatively, I'm going to offer this training where I'm going to be the instructor. I just need 8 students in the room to break even and profit a little bit. And that's what I did.
When did you when did you start monetizing? From the moment you did your free event?
So I launched.
Your first course?
I rented the third of a desk on July 14th of 2014, and the first cohort.
The Bastille Day in France.
Yeah, and the first cohort was in mid-October.
Mid-October, okay.
Because I wanted it to finish by the end of the year.
So in 3 months you accumulated enough. You built a big community of people who went to your events.
Yes, I had no time to waste, and if for whatever reason that experiment didn't work, I would have pivoted into something else.
How many paid students did you have in your first course?
8, full house.
Full house, wonderful.
A full house, and the price back then was $3,000.
For how long?
For that time was 6-7 weeks, basically.
Similar to what you have now.
Similar. Actually, there are a few key decisions that I made very early on that stayed true.
What are those decisions?
Format. It has to be on weeknights or weekends to allow professionals to not have to put their work or life on hold. This can be short, like you don't need more than 2 months if you can focus on the specific areas that you need in order to get that next step in your career, and really high quality of instructors. At some point I had to delegate and find much better instructors than myself, these product leaders from Google, Airbnb, or Netflix.
When did you start delegating?
Took me almost 2 years.
2 years? So this was 2016?
2016, yes. So I packed the first cohort. I went all in. I really wanted to provide the best quality experience for my students.
Maximum value, yeah.
I still didn't have all the content. I was literally building. I sold before I built, or while I was building, right? I was the product, and it worked, because that doesn't mean that I didn't know what I was talking about. It's just I spent my time with them trying to understand what they wanted to learn versus trying to create a PowerPoint that didn't resonate with the audience. And it worked so well. Then I created a parallel cohort. There was one on weeknights, so it was Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6:30 to 8. And then there was another one on Saturdays in the morning. So what I learned is that there were some weekend people and there are some weeknight people. So here I am now with my full-time job, which is running the company and organizing all of these events. And then some nights I would be teaching a weeknight cohort, and then on Saturdays I would be teaching a weekend cohort. I almost had a heart attack. I did that for the first 2 years, and
everything done by yourself.
Everything.
Crazy.
Everything, and I reinvested also every penny into the business. I really wanted to grow, but in a very thoughtful way. I wanted to ensure quality, and I don't know if I should have delegated a little earlier, because it really affected my health to do so much for so long. But I was so obsessed with quality. And still I am to this day. And I just didn't want this to be yet another basic course or another scammy course that says, become a millionaire in 2 weeks if you follow my playbook. these are real people, and they are also my marketing team, because at the end of the program, they are the ones who were writing testimonials on Yelp or LinkedIn or other places, and they are the ones that I was introducing to prospective students when they were requesting more information, like, hey, don't take it from me. Talk to this person who spent 2 months with me and see where they are, and let that person tell you more about their experience.
When did you start using online marketing?
Well, I used online marketing since the very beginning, but in an organic way, right?
Gotcha.
I didn't spend on online marketing. I was always very active on these discussion forums.
It wasn't paid. Got it. More organic.
I was asking my students, I was ensuring that my students would have a successful experience and asking them to write those testimonials online, and I was introducing them to prospective students. So that was my marketing. I couldn't afford paid ads at that point. I think in 2015 or so we started with the paid program. But I also kept the offline marketing part. The event is something extremely successful that at some point I had to find other speakers to help me.
You still have it till this day. You have events on a daily basis. I checked your calendar, like every single day.
Every single.
That's crazy. So some of those decisions you made back in 14, they're still here.
They are. Yeah. They care for quality and building a community and trying to give as much upfront as possible. Still 80+% of our community are not customers. They might never become customers, and that's okay, because I hope that this is helpful for them, and I also hope that they can tell others about their positive experience. So it's a win-win for everybody, and that long-term vision is something that I don't want to change. A lot of companies try now to create a community to sell their product, and in reality it's more of an audience than really a community where peers can benefit from each other. So that's one of those decisions that I made early on. Obviously, we had to make it evolve it so they could scale. Now, all of our trainings, all of our events are live online. And while I still enjoy participating in some of them, we have a very big network of product leaders who are much more experienced than me in product, who are the ones leading those events.
Let's talk about 2015. What happened there?
2015, okay, so 2014 worked, that first pilot. 2015, we say, let's grow, but still offline. So I realized that a lot of the students that were coming to my weekend or weeknight classes were living in South Bay, Palo Alto, Mountain View, even San Jose, and it's a long commute for them because the classes were happening co-working space. I was just renting the meeting room for the class. So I decided to create a second campus in the South Bay, in Silicon Valley, to optimize for them, and it worked. The challenge is I cannot clone myself. So what I did was to have some of those classes on Sundays instead of Saturdays, or on Mondays, Wednesdays instead of Tuesdays, Thursdays.
So you would commute?
I would commute. I would be running 2 campuses.
Doing free courses at the same time?
I was doing, well, the trainings were paid.
Correct.
The ones on weeknights and weekends. But the events were always, and they're still free.
Free, yeah.
So since I was trying to focus more on the paid trainings and be that product for the paid students, I started finding product leaders to participate as speakers.
And your events were weekly or daily back then? Probably weekly.
Weekly, at least.
That makes sense.
So I hired this first person on Craigslist. It's a very famous website here as a assistant / COO / everything in between that would help me with some of the logistics.
How many people did you have to interview to get to first hire?
Oh, a lot. I'm very picky with that. That was another lesson learned as a founder. Try to hire slow. Even though I need someone to join us yesterday, I would try to take my time to vet the candidates and find someone who could really hustle with me. Because a lot of people want to join a startup, but they don't fully understand the dark side or the hard side of a startup. Anyway, this person was critical to help me find more speakers. First, I would tap into my own network, but at some point, I grew out of my own network and started finding VPs of product, directors of product at Google, Netflix, Airbnb. I would invite them to participate as speakers. A lot of them would say yes, and I did it in a very cold way, similar to how I was describing the process to get a job. I was doing it to offer people to come and speak at my events for free. So I had to figure out the value prop, because at that time nobody knew about product school. So I was trying to touch their heart and make them resonate with with the solution, or the problem that I'm trying to solve. And a lot of them say, yeah, when I became a PM, it was pure chance. I didn't have a training. I just figured it out. So let me go and help the next generation. Mm-hmm. And then we leverage those speakers to bring us other speakers. The same way we're leveraging students to bring out other students. So we were always thinking in loops. Like there's this concept around how to create a growth loop, mm-hmm. to repurpose content, to leverage your existing users, to bring net new users. So I was literally treating my own company and treating myself as a product and try to find those type of opportunities to look bigger and to scale, even though we were just a team of two. But that started working. So it was time, 2015, to expand outside Silicon Valley, mm-hmm. New York.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you expanded to New York in 15?
Yeah, in November of 2015, expanded to New York. And there is no way I can run 3 campuses at that time. So I brought my brother from Spain, who I put him in charge of the Silicon Valley campus. Mm-hmm. And my brother is very similar to me, just 4 years younger. He and I worked in my previous startup together, and he actually took one of my first cohorts in product. I was like, okay, I'm going to teach you all I know, but I want to do it with other people, so this you listen to me, otherwise you're not going to pay enough attention. And he loved it. He's really hardworking, and I can fully trust him. So he was in charge of organizing events and running the Silicon Valley campus. I was doing the same thing for San Francisco, and then I found someone to do the same in New York. So I would fly there all the time to do the training, to spend as much time. I still teach. I wasn't teaching a full cohort, but I would participate as a speaker in some of the events. And this person is still with us to this day. He's been with us for 8 years. Mm-hmm. That was very, very scrappy. That's all we could do. And that was 2015. 2016, this model kept working, and we decided to continue expanding physically to other locations. So LA was our next target. Mm-hmm. The thing with LA is that it's so spread out that when I went there with my backpack thinking, well, I'm going to find another co-working space to do the same, to replicate the model, I realized I needed 3. I needed 1 in Santa Monica, 1 in downtown LA, and 1 in Irvine. It's in a way similar to Silicon Valley, it's so spread out that in order to optimize for the customer, it's important to be closer to them. So I'm like, okay, but now how do I do this? Because I need more than 1 person to do this dance. But I figured it out. Like, we were just trying to create the playbook that I used for New York, but I tried to adjust it to LA. And so in early 2016, here we are with 3 campuses in LA, 2 in the Bay Area, 1 in New York, 6.
And you have 6 different mentors in each.
Yeah, at that time, I mean, LA and New York have such a strong tech scene that we had no issue finding really top product leaders there with the local flavor. So a lot of the instructors in LA come from Snapchat, Netflix, Hulu, more the entertainment industry. In New York, it's more fintech.
Foursquare,
We had some from Foursquare. We also had people from American Express. We had some
DoubleClick,
So it was good because the audience there also gravitates toward that type of product management. So while the frameworks can be the same, there's definitely value in adjusting those frameworks to your specific domain. So that's how we did it. 2016. And we're like, okay, this is working. Let's keep going. Mm-hmm. So 2016 was a major expansion for us because we grew the company to 16 physical locations. 14 of them were in the US, and then we added London and Toronto.
It's 2016.
2016, yeah.
14 locations in the US where?
We had Chicago, we had Denver, 2 in Denver, because it was Boulder and Denver. We had Seattle, we had Austin, it was booming, Miami. So we're trying to go for all the tech hubs. Mm-hmm. And at some point, we ran out of tech hubs in the US. So we decided to go to Toronto and then London as our first European campus. Mm-hmm. By the way, this sounds very grandiose, but we didn't really own anything. We were still renting meeting rooms in co-working spaces. So the cost structure was extremely flexible. If we had extra demand in a city, we could get a second room and a second instructor. If there's not enough demand, we downsize, no problem. Mm-hmm. That was always my scrappy mindset to do things that now scale a little better, but still don't keep us too attached to the fluctuations of the market. And this was, I think 2017 is when we finalized that physical expansion. And it got to a point where we said, okay, some of these campuses are performing much better than others. Bay Area, New York, LA were booming. The other campuses they were all profitable, but it wasn't very scalable. We ran some classes with maybe 5 students, and that's good, but not great as you think about the next phase for your company. So we said, well, let's open this online campus. This is 2017 now. And the hypothesis was to use it as a catch-all, where students who don't live in any of these 16 locations would join online. And we made a few key decisions. One is, we're not going to treat online as a second-class citizen, meaning we're going to keep the same price, we're going to keep the same level of service. If anything, it's going to be better because the instructors who are going to lead the online cohorts are all going to be based in New York, Silicon Valley, LA. We're going to bring the best to whoever wants to attend this online cohort. And thank God we made that decision, because one of the learnings was that over 30% of people that were joining the online campus were actually located in cities where they had a physical campus. I didn't expect that. They were choosing online just because it was more convenient or because they wanted that instructor, and different reasons. So with that insight in mind, we then had to change our roadmap and our strategy, because online was much more scalable and much more profitable. Right? We were just running the classes on Zoom.
I mean, Visit 2017, you were a pioneer in online education because Lambda only came out that summer.
Yeah. This is way before the pandemic.
Correct.
Yes, there's been
very
always a lot of online courses, but not live online. And
back then it was all about offline, Hack Reactor, coding bootcamps.
Yeah, so all of these bootcamps were focused on coding, how to make professionals get that first coding job.
Correct.
I was the first non-coding bootcamp, because I studied computer science, and I know there's a percentage of coders who don't want to do coding, like myself. So I wanted to use that concept because I think it's fascinating to apply like a different format in a much more efficient way and much more cost-efficient way to help people get jobs. But not all the jobs need to be coding. And that was the concept that I, to this day, been using, focused on product. So when online started taking off, we realized that it made sense to start shutting down some of those physical locations. That was hard because you get too attached to your baby, it's kind of working, so why would you shut it down if it works? Well, because there's something else that is working better, and in a way, those mental models that made us successful to a certain degree might backfire as we move into the next phase. So speaking of growth, some of those early day events and online forums were very successful, but when you have your first 100 or 1,000 users, we had to change the playbook for that next 10,000 or 100,000 users. And that's what we did. So it was a slow transition. We at some point kept our top physical campuses, San Francisco, LA, and New York. And that's how we operated up until the pandemic, basically. We also experimented with the portfolio of products that we were offering to our students. So the bread and butter, the first program was what we call PMC, Product Manager Certification, focused on the aspiring product manager. And then we evolved into creating more programs for existing PMs, because when I started the company, there was no career ladder for product managers. A lot of companies didn't have product managers. Now, it's not a secret anymore. This is not a niche. Many companies, not just in Silicon Valley or in tech, have product managers. They call themselves software companies, regardless of the product that they sell. So now there is much more maturity in the market, and we can see people working in senior PM roles, director of product, VP, and in some cases even chief product officer. So we decided to create certifications for different levels of that career ladder.
Amazing. So 18, 19, you were basically kind of growing your online presence. When did you shut down your New York City, Bay Area, and LA office?
We did it
offline?
In early 2020.
Early 2020.
So we did it right before the pandemic. We would have done it anyway a few months later, but I think doing it earlier gave us the opportunity to have a head start. So when the world was forced to work remotely, or students were forced to learn online, we were doing that already. We were already offering our live online programs. Our whole company works 100% remote. And that was probably luck, or maybe a combination of luck, hard work, and some data from the market. But still, I got lucky.
You were well prepared for 2020 because of everything you did starting from 2020 to 2017, right? So it was fully sort of remote online company.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could claim, I had all of this figured out in my business plan, but no. Yes, I was working hard and trying to iterate even our own strategy, and I think treating the company as a product and knowing that especially these high stakes decisions can be two-way door decisions where you can change based on new information. So we have a 3-year strategy plan that we refresh every year. We have our OKRs that we refresh every quarter. We have a roadmap that we also refresh every quarter. So I think it's important to not get too attached to a plan, but still use it as a good indicator for people to have a common direction.
What happened in 2020?
So 2020, our business tripled for 2 reasons. One is obviously lockdown, and online learning was the only type of learning. And product management became one of the most in-demand skills in the world. We were already seeing the growth, but what happened at that time was explosive. And we had to adjust the business to also support that demand while keeping quality. So it was, from that perspective, an interesting learning opportunity, as well as extremely challenging, because sure, most of my life I've spent it trying to get to market fit and grow user by user, but then suddenly we were at the right place at the right time, and then we get this overwhelming demand we weren't ready for. So it was an important moment for us to realize that maybe we had to raise some capital. I bootstrapped the business for 7.5 years. And I was ready to keep going because...
How big was your core team in 2020?
Maybe 40 to 50 people.
40 to 50, and those were like primarily program coordinators?
We had a combination of marketers, admissions managers, people on the ops side coordinating experience with the users, some engineers and product managers.
Got it.
For our website, our internal tools, but very small operation.
Why did you decide to raise capital?
Because of the incredible opportunity in front of us. I always, so I told you I was burnt out from my experience raising capital before, so I was very aware of not repeating those same mistakes. And during all of the 7-ish years that I was bootstrapping, I would always take the call when an investor would reached out. It was funny because in my previous startup, I was the one reaching out to investors,
Correct.
right? I was like, where were you when I needed you most, right? And then when I started this new company, since Profile was always being profitable, there's a lot of investors that somehow would find us and say, hey, we're interested in your business. And I would always say, yeah, let's take the call. By the way, I'm not raising capital. And that was good because I learned more about their perspective in a way where there was no pressure. There was no hiding item on the agenda for me to then try to raise money, or for them to try to oversell me why they need to be the ones who give me that money. And that was it. I also met this investment banker that knew the space very, very well, and other players in the bootcamp category. So we had some interesting data points. I try not to be too distracted about that, but I always keep an eye because my role as a CEO is also to focus on the future, and I don't want to close a door too early. But when this opportunity happened, we realized that it's time to go. Like, this is not a niche. Product management is not a niche anymore. There are tons of companies hiring product managers, and those companies don't work in high tech only. Those companies are not only based in Silicon Valley or New York or the US, and it's time to go. Because if we don't do this, someone else will. And I think it's going to get even bigger. Now, how do we do it in a thoughtful way so I don't burn out? And here was the key part for me. I learned what private equity is. And I realized that not all types of money are the same. Not everything has to be venture capital. And by the way, I say this with utmost respect to venture capital. There are companies that are optimized for venture capital and they are extremely successful. Based on my conversations with both venture capitalists as well as private equity investors, I realized that we were a much better fit for private equity because, number one, we are profitable. Number two, we want to grow in a profitable way. We don't need to play the game of 100x or nothing. We want to play the game of 5x for sure, every X amount of years.
Correct.
And we decided to go to market, run a process, talk to the groups that we liked most, and found this perfect fit with a group called Let's Illuminate. This is a growth equity firm. So within private equity, they have growth equity, which is funds that focus on minority investments. So what I realized is that I wanted to accelerate growth, but I didn't want to lose control.
Correct.
So that was an important thing for me, and I found this group that were totally aligned with that. I also didn't want to change my profitable profile, and they were totally on board with that. And then they have really good expertise in EdTech. One of the problems when trying to raise money when you have to is that you end up probably making mistakes by just taking money from whoever can give it to you. But if you are in a position of power or strength and you always have the option to not take money, I was able to learn more about the type of money I was taking and think that I'm marrying to this type of investors, right? I'm going to be with them for the foreseeable future, and not everything is always going to be a hockey stick. So how are they going to react when things don't go as well as expected? How am I going to react? Is this someone I want to be on a plane with for 10 hours? Or is this someone who I just want to have a transactional relationship with? And to me, it was very important to find someone that I can really connect and learn from and get more than just money. And 18 months into this marriage, I'm still in love with them and happy, and I can only say good things about that experience.
Let's talk about private equity piece really quick. So, there are different types of private equity. You have sort of firms who take over the company, you have firms who do the turnarounds, but at the end of the day, they're looking for, let's say, 3 to 5x exit. Typically, it's not hold forever kind of stake. Is it this case with you? What kind of liquidity are they looking for in the future?
Mm-hmm. When you raise money, you kind of commit to a certain path to continue raising money, or at least to provide a return to the people who gave you money in the first place. That's why they gave you money. So I think it was important for us to be aware of their own expectations as well as our expectations, so there is no misunderstandings down the line. And I agree with your read. There are like different types of private equity firms. Some are focused on buyouts and they want a majority stake in a business.
Yeah.
They still want to keep the founding team, but they want to run the show. And sometimes they also want to load the company with debt and change some of the dynamics. There are other groups that prefer to take a minority stake and let the founding team continue leading and just be more of a thought partner than the main driver. And that's what I chose to do.
Correct.
And I didn't want to. I love what I'm doing. I believe in the future of this company, and I didn't want to become a glorified employee just because I decided to take some money, right? And that was my logic. Obviously, there are so many different details that go into how to structure a term sheet with private equity, but another important differentiator is the cap table is much cleaner. Usually private equity doesn't like to share the cap table with other investors. They want it all for themselves. It has pros and cons, but one of the pros is that from an employee perspective, you don't get put back on the line. It's a lot of companies that have raised from VCs and business angels and so many different investors, and they have this complicated cap table. So in case there is a liquidity event, sometimes employees are the ones who take the hit and not end up benefiting from that liquidity event. So with a cleaner cap table, all the team knows that, yes, we have an investor, and then it's us.
Are you going to be distributing dividends at the end of the year to your investors, or?
No, in that from that perspective, we wanted to participate from the upside and focus on long term. So by taking dividends, we'll probably be jeopardizing some of that growth potential. The mandate that we share is to focus on continue growing the company profitably, to keep the quality bar as high as possible, and then there are different options. Usually the horizon for funds to de-invest is 4 to 7 years. In our case, we are part of their first fund, so they have definitely a more long-term point of view in this case. But typically when the time is right, because at some point it's naive to assume that it's never going to happen. Like, we owe a return to our investors. Most likely if you take private equity money, you're going to keep taking private equity money. If you take VC money, you're probably going to keep taking VC money. I've seen companies where I have a hybrid of VC and PE. So all of the options are possible, but in our case, if you ask me today, first, while staying profitable gives us the option to not have to take more money, control our destiny a little more. But if we were to take more money in the future, it would probably be on this type of way, like growing profitably.
You've been very disciplined when it comes to your course offering. I mean, you have 3 courses at the moment. The third is coming up, right? You have product management training, you have product management leadership training to get promotions when you're already a PM. You're starting a PM marketing, product marketing certificate soon. Is it the plan going forward? Are you going to be adding new courses in the future?
So this is a really good question, because the type of money you take also influences the answer. If I had taken VC money,
you'll have 100 courses.
Correct. And maybe some of them wouldn't be as good as others, and we'll be optimizing for maybe the investor, not so much for the student. In our case, we didn't have to grow at all costs or diversify and lose the identity. So product school is focused on product, and that is important to me. Within product, there's obviously opportunity. Right? As the career ladder evolved for product roles, we saw the opportunity to launch a certification for the existing product managers that want to become leaders. Another thing that is happening right now is that product marketing is growing as a dedicated role. Small companies, usually the product manager is wearing both hats, product manager as well as the product marketer. But as product becomes more strategic in an organization and there are deeper and more relationships with other functions, we're seeing the role of product marketing emerge. And that role is sometimes can be under marketing, sometimes can be under the product team, but there's definitely a lot of overlap with product management, and we decided to launch this certification to help aspiring product marketers get that first job as well.
Got it. Let's talk about the bootcamp landscape. It's been evolving. I remember April 2011 when I went to General Assembly in New York City for the first time. I had no idea what bootcamps were back then. But then there was kind of a explosion. We had Hack Reactor 2012, I would say, Dev Bootcamp, like lots of them, and they had a pretty similar program, 3 months, super intense, full time. Kind of become a full-time software engineer in a really quick time. On the other end, you had you had MOOCs. That's totally different kind of market. Very fully online, very low completion rates, 3 to 7%. Hack Reactors and the bootcamps more of an offline fashion. When Lambda School came out in 2017, they pioneered the income share agreement program, where made it more available to students. You've been in this space for almost a decade. Tell me your perspective on the landscape and how it evolved.
Yeah, I've seen it grow from literally nothing to where it is today, and General Assembly was actually the pioneer. They are the ones who created this type of bootcamp format to help people acquire a skill really quickly, and usually those skills were connected to employment. General Assembly started as a co-working space in New York, and as they were thinking about how to diversify, they started organizing some of these workshops, and they turned into more organized bootcamps or training programs. And after General Assembly, you said 2009?
I went there 2011.
2011, yeah, that's 2009, 2011 is when they started doing all of this. The next big bootcamp was Dev Bootcamp. They were focused on coding. And it's funny because a lot of the bootcamps that came after were students that took that first cohort at Dev Bootcamp. So Hack Reactor started right after Dev Bootcamp because the founder was one of the students there. Yes. And then we saw a few others. So as you mentioned, way before the bootcamps, we had the MOOCs, right? The massive online courses.
Yes.
And that model didn't work. That's the time, because this whole promise around, oh, everybody's going to learn for free. We're going to put Harvard and Stanford courses in front of you, and they are as good as the ones that you take in on campus, and then just watch the video, and then suddenly you become an expert. Clearly didn't work. You mentioned the engagement was not good. So we went from that to the opposite, which is bootcamps. Super intense, super specific, focused on employment, and that format worked. And I love that format because I think it was also a good wake-up call for universities to start innovating a little bit more and try to find more efficient ways to connect employment with education. But yeah, GA was the first, then Dev Bootcamp, then there was an explosion of coding bootcamps, especially in San Francisco, because that value proposition worked. It's such a high demand for tech jobs, especially engineering jobs here, that those schools were able to train people, regardless of their professional background. They were able to train people for, let's say, 3 months full-time and then help them get pretty high salary jobs in engineering. Maybe entry-level jobs, but still, engineering is a very high-paid role in Silicon Valley. So the next evolution of that was the non-coding bootcamps. And that's what I did. In 2014, I was the first, or one of the first non-coding bootcamp, in this case focused on product management. But there are other categories. There are bootcamps focused on UX design, digital marketing, data analytics, or cybersecurity, to name a few.
Interesting. And when it comes to the business model, what's the difference?
That has evolved as well, because as you mentioned, with Lambda School was one of the pioneers in a different business model called ISA, Income Share Agreement. What they were, so starting from the beginning, the traditional business model that General Assembly had, that we have, is we charge tuition for the students that want to take that training. There's been different flavors to that. We have some schools that would say, no, you can take the program for free. The ISA model is you take the program for free, and we're going to take a cut from your first year's salary. That has pros and cons. The pros is that obviously the school is highly incentivized to get you a job. The con is that some of those schools became very, very greedy and started taking sometimes more than 20% of the first year's salary. So that is a lot of money for the students. And there's everything in between. There are some financial players that are allowing some flexible financing options for the students, so they don't have to sell a quarter of their future salary, but at the same time they can afford to start these trainings, and they don't have to spend too much money. Because I think what's important for this model to succeed is to take the best parts of universities, but not copy the bad parts of it. I don't think they have, so bootcamps tend to be very specific on one topic. They tend to be very short, very intense. They tend to be much more affordable. Like the traditional model of 2 years or 4 years full time to learn something and then hope that thing is going to lead you to your dream job is a little outdated. At the same time, I don't think bootcamps, or most bootcamps, at least mine, is positioned to replace all universities. I think there is a time and a place for all of that, because education is good. Ultimately, I'm a fan of education. I believe in high quality education. And I think it's important for people that want to go to college to go through college, the same way it's important for people to want to keep learning, to have more flexible options, to continue learning as they build their own family, have their own job, and do other things with their life.
The first line in Anna Karenina, popularized by Peter Thiel in his 0 to 1 book, is all the happy families are happy for different reasons, and all the unhappy family are unhappy for the same one. Similarly, in company success, the path to success is very unique. The path to failure is very common. If you were to look back and analyze the companies who, in the education space, the bootcamp space, and those companies which didn't succeed, what are the common themes and the reasons for failure?
So we saw this model go from 1 or 2 companies to over 100 companies, probably too many. There was a little bit of a gold rush fever here, where a lot of people started thinking, well, I don't need much in order to start school. I can rent a room in a co-working space, I can teach something that I know, and because the market is so hot, even if I'm not the best, if you know enough, you're going to get a high-paying job. Well, maybe that was true for a very short period of time, but obviously you have to deliver. There has to be a certain quality bar for the best companies to survive. Mm-hmm. And that is common in many other industries. We've seen it across the board, but it's not different than education in this case. So the companies that were just trying to grab a quick buck and didn't survive when the market conditions got a little tougher, when some of these larger players started to consolidate and acquire or merge with each other, then the winners popped up. And now we're seeing that in a much more mature environment, there are clear leaders for each vertical. In general, best schools are the ones that are specialized in one vertical. So you have the top coding schools, you have the top product management school, you have the top UX design school. Companies that try to grab too much also didn't succeed, just because it's very hard to be the best at multiple things all at once. Mm-hmm. So I would say those are the two main patterns, probably like the lack of focus on quality as well as lack of focus on topic.
Mm-hmm. And I guess a lot of them miss the community aspect. It's such a long-term vision that, hey, I will have lots of people who don't even pay. They are not paying customers, but I'm okay with that because I'm here for the long term.
Well, that's the classic venture capital model. Mm-hmm. And again, that can work, and we've seen very successful VC-backed education technology companies. But in a way, when this became more of a category than a niche, there was a lot of money poured into the category, and a lot of the companies focused on just acquiring users.
Correct.
And teaching so many different things all at once. But at some point, you have to show outcomes, right? These are real humans that invested money and time in you, and if they don't have a good connection to employment, they're going to complain if you read them off with a bad term because you just offer this education for free, but then in reality you are on the back end charging them way too much money. They are going to complain. So I think in a way it's healthy that there was more maturity in the market. So now it's easier for students to do the research and hopefully use that to make the right decision. Now, that being said, it's important for any student that is considering this type of education to realize that there is no silver bullet. Mm-hmm. Even if you get accepted into the best bootcamp, you still need to put in the work. And there is no replacement for that. So sometimes people would come with the wrong expectations and expect a job at Google or Uber just because I'm taking this program. Sure, this is going to help you, but I cannot pass the interview for you. And I hope that also as these programs become much more global, because a lot of them are now being taught online, create healthier competition across talent. Because yes, when all of this was in person and there was a lot of coding jobs in San Francisco, you had to be in San Francisco to be able to get this type of high-paying job. Now a lot of companies are remote. Talent is, I believe, equally distributed. Maybe opportunity is not. So that is allowing companies to be also pickier and say, I'm going to find best possible engineer, product manager, UX designer, wherever they are. And now these people are also having access to the best possible education. So I think it's good for the student. It's ultimately good for the schools because it's going to push us to keep raising the quality bar.
Mm-hmm. Let's zoom out from bootcamp space a little bit and talk about EdTech in general. You have exciting companies. You have Khan Academy and Duolingo recently. Both of them released their generative AI assistants, Khan Amigo, which is teaching you. You can ask any question based on the problem you're looking at. Duolingo Max lets you have a language partner who is available 24/7. What are some of the trends in EdTech are you excited about at the moment?
Well, a few months ago, you saw the stock price of a company called Check.
Oh, it just plummeted, yeah.
Yes, in the moment the people start talking about AI, because that company definitely creates a lot of content, and now apparently the content is becoming more of a commodity. At the same time, I believe there are going to be a lot of other winners as well as a lot of other losers. We're probably at the early stage, which is month 6, year 1 of what it's supposed to be a paradigm change in technology. So I take my answer with a grain of salt, and also know that a lot of the best things are still yet to come. But I've been in Silicon Valley for long enough to see how other technology breakthroughs play out. Mm-hmm. Not so long ago, we were all talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Mm-hmm. And then we started talking about VR and AR. Metaverse, Web3, NFTs. Some of those things were stickier than others, and maybe they come back in a different way. So in general, I'm an optimist. I'm a believer in technology. What I'm not a believer on is in scamming people. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem with this type of new technologies at the early stage is that people, they don't have enough maturity or education, and they try to learn fast, grab a quick buck, and not always know what is the right way to approach this type of opportunity. So in AI, I see something similar. Everyone is trying to figure out how to inject AI into their roadmaps or put AI into their homepage to either raise more money or try to get more attention, and I get it, and I think it's in a way a smart move. Why not? But I'm very curious to know how that's really going to drive business outcomes. What are the real use cases that are going to confirm if AI is going to be here to stay? I'm personally a believer in that, and as you asked me about education use cases, we are definitely using AI for content creation purposes. We are using AI for marketing purposes as well, creating transcripts, organizing meeting summaries. We are using it for creating video clips from our events and podcasts. But those tend to be like table stakes use cases. Now I'm very excited to see what's going to be the next generation of use cases for AI in education in particular. So for us, we are currently building a certification on AI for product. And I'm personally wearing that student hat for now, because I believe that in order to be a good instructor, in order to really help others with something, you first need to fully understand it. And I think it's going to be, like, the next few months are going to be critical for us to start finding ways to show value, and for people to know how to leverage that for their own day-to-day. Still, some of these concepts sound very abstract, very technical. I think there is going to be an opportunity to demystify some of that and make it more tangible for people to start using AI on their daily basis. Not everything has to be a whole new AI product.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If we were to discuss cohort-based learning as a category, you have some exciting companies there. You have Maven, it's sort of a marketplace for all kinds of CBL courses taught by different influencers and so forth. You have Rite of Passage, an amazing course. Quite a few of my friends took it, became much better writers, started writing on a daily basis thanks to that. You have Alt MBA by Seth Godin, sort of a alternative MBA program, also cohort-based. Any other companies are you in education space are you excited about? Can be CBL, can be outside of CBL.
I think that's fantastic. This concept can be called creator economy, where really, really good experts in something are able to monetize that knowledge directly without a specific platform. Or maybe they are using a platform, they are just giving a small fee to that platform, but they are the face of their product. And I saw the evolution of this as well, because my previous company was mostly focused on creating a marketplace for these type of experts so they could monetize their content. It was called Flock. It was very similar to Udemy. Right, it's a huge marketplace where basically any expert can create a video course and monetize that way. Students would pay, and then the platform would keep a fee. The evolution of this format is what you coined a cohort-based course, where it's live, it's still online, but it's live. That expert is in the classroom with you. It's answering your questions. It's facilitating the discussions. It's not just a video where you don't really know what's happening and engagement is not always great. So I'm bullish on that format, obviously the format that we also use. And I think it's a good thing that now creators are finding different ways to monetize their knowledge. Not so long ago, the only way for them to monetize that knowledge was through on-demand videos, or maybe they then suddenly were able to monetize newsletters. There were companies like Substack or Patreon that allow them to create some paid products, podcasts, or now courses. So you can pick your poison. But I think what's critical here is quality. And that is non-negotiable, because at the end of the day, if someone doesn't like that product, it's just not going to recommend it. And it sounds very basic, but it's at the core of every single product, physical or digital.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about your life as a CEO. How did you evolve as a CEO over the years? Let's just start there.
Well, I've been a CEO pretty much my whole life. CEO sounds very big. I've been a founder. I've been a curious mind my whole life. So I studied computer science in Spain, and my passion was always technology. I wanted to create something and be closer to my idols, Steve Jobs and other tech or startup celebrities, right? So I soon realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life coding. I appreciate having a technical background. I just didn't know how else I could leverage it. And unfortunately in school, they didn't show me how. I remember once a professor asked, who here wants to start a company? And I'm the only one who raised the hand. I just did it a little bit because I felt ashamed. I was feeling judged by others, right? And there is nothing wrong with not starting a company, but I think there is nothing wrong with starting a company either. So I started my unofficial entrepreneurial career by selling wristbands online.
Which year was it?
I was still in high school.
In high school?
This, so 2000 or 1999, something like that. So .com bubble, the internet starts becoming more mainstream, and then I realized that there was this type of wristbands called Livestrong. They were created by Nike, and a lot of people in Spain wanted to buy them, but they couldn't find
yellow
them.
ones.
Yellow ones.
Lance
yes.
Armstrong, yeah.
Yes, and then this sounds super basic, but that was a breakthrough for me. I went to that website. I had no internet at home, no computer. I would go to a cafe, internet, whatever, pay a little bit of money to have internet for 30 minutes. And I would go to livestrong.com and I would buy a pack of 10 for $10. Simple. I wouldn't even consider that being a CEO or being a founder. I just realized that you could buy something that is not only in the store, in your house, in your neighborhood. And then I would put ads on newspapers, physical newspapers, to say, I'm selling a wristband. And I would mark it up. I would sell it for $10 up to $20 in some cases, euro, but the point is that was the equivalent. And I started selling to neighbors and then to people in the city, so I would start organizing my schedule and started skipping school. I was in my last year of high school. I would leave a house with my backpack, but instead of going to class, I would start meeting with those clients that I met through the newspaper ads and sell them the wristbands for what I would consider at the time a lot of money. And then I started selling it outside my city and to the entire country, because I would realize that you could use things like FedEx or UPS to ship, and I would charge for shipping, but I would increase my TAM, right, my target addressable market. And I was making so much money, but at the same time I was skipping so much school that the professors called home and they told my parents. And that was a critical time, because of course my parents wanted me to finish school, and I committed to finish school, but at the same time I was making so much money and learning so much and having so much fun by doing something like this that I didn't want to lose that aspect. So that was kind of the beginning of my entrepreneurial career. Then when I went into college, I created a non-profit where we organized events on campus, where we would invite what I would consider very inspirational figures. So athletes, movie directors, very successful business people, similar to the TED events, but for college students, people who don't know much about TED. This is because I wanted to learn from people I'm inspired by. I just didn't want to learn from my professors that I was assigned to. And I put together this group in my college, and then I started doing it in other colleges. Next time, we have a network of hungry students organizing local events, and that was fascinating. We learned how to organize ourselves, how to find sponsors. So even though it wasn't an official company, it was a non-profit, I learned a lot. So I always found a way to keep doing the right thing, which is finishing my studies while also staying curious and active in the business world. After that non-profit, and I started Flock, this education marketplace.
Before Flock, you had a company called NetDay.
That was the non-profit.
Oh, that was a non-profit.
NetDay.
Got it.
Yes.
It was NetDay. This was straight out of college, right?
Yeah. So this was right when I was a computer science student, and then I moved. So what happened is I realized this is very inspiring for people. They would come to these events, they would love it, but I wouldn't really change that behavior because people would go back to classrooms or to their work and they would continue doing the same thing. So my idea was, well, how can I change behavior? I think beyond events, we need to train people, and we want these creators, these experts, to be able to be the ones who teach. So I created this marketplace similar to Udemy or even YouTube, right? It's just a place where anyone could create good, high quality content, find their niche, and monetize it.
And you started that in 2011, right?
I started that in 2011.
When you moved here, or
exactly, right when I moved here. So in my two previous ventures, in the non-profit, I didn't make any money. But in my unofficial business selling wristbands online, I made a lot of money. I made enough to pay for my graduate school in UC Berkeley.
Why did you decide to move to the US? And when was the decision made? When did you move here?
I love Silicon Valley. I love technology so much. I knew I always wanted to be here. And coming here as a student was the easiest way to do it because there's it's always tricky to find a visa.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be here. Being here as a student was the way I did it.
Got it. So you moved.
I moved from Spain to Silicon Valley. I started a graduate program in UC Berkeley, which is a business program. So it's literally the opposite of computer science. And I met a lot of engineers like myself that were thinking business, so that was very refreshing. I also met a lot of other folks coming from consulting, finance, different backgrounds. And once I was here, I was like, okay, now what's next? Because my ultimate goal is not just to get a degree and go back home. So I started this education marketplace. And
what was your initial insight?
My insight is the learning from my previous company. I realized that organizing events was very inspiring, but not enough to change behavior. So we wanted to train people, and we wanted to find the best experts to do it in a more scalable way. A lot of learnings from that experience, right? Because while it was really incredible to create a real startup, that was the first official company that was supposed to make money, it didn't make money. We raised venture capital, we grew, we had a lot of users. At some point we became the largest education platform in Spanish-speaking world, so in Latin America and Spain. We also started creating content in Portuguese for Brazil and Portugal. So from that perspective, an incredible learning opportunity, and the company is still alive and it's profitable. We were able to pivot it and make sure that continue.
You sold it?
I sold it to exiting investors, so it wasn't like a major exit or anything, but I'm proud of the fact that I was able to adjust and keep that company going. I'm not involved in it anymore, but I'm happy that it's still going.
What are some of the mistakes you made back then, you think?
Oh, how much time do we have?
Plenty.
So first, I went for too much too quickly. I wanted to teach everything to everybody, right? It was an education marketplace. So we had classes about cooking and coding and everything in between. We also raised money too quickly, and we were optimizing for a different type of metric. We were optimizing for user growth, for being featured on TechCrunch, for having a huge valuation, for having a huge team. And at that time, I just don't think that was the right move. And that doesn't mean that we didn't work hard. We definitely did everything we could, but it was just our first or second attempt. And some of those learnings came the hard way.
You were part of Startup Chile and 500 Startups. Talk about some of the memories you have from those programs.
Yeah, so right after I finished my program at UC Berkeley, I unfortunately couldn't stay in the country because I was on a student visa. So I had to go back to Spain, but I recruited some of my best classmates to start this company with me. There was someone from Germany, there was someone from Slovenia. We brought them to Spain. I mean, Spain is really cool, so it was a good value proposition. I come here, good weather, good people.
A lot of soccer,
A lot of soccer. We speak English.
Cycling, yeah.
And we started literally in a garage. The Silicon Valley way, outside Silicon Valley. And as soon as we built our first MVP, we started getting some traction. We raised some capital from angel investors and VCs in Spain. And then I had the opportunity to go and do Startup Chile. I applied and got accepted. It's a startup accelerator organized by the government of Chile that allows international companies come to Santiago and they give them free capital, literally. They don't take any equity. What they want is top talent in their country to inspire the next generation of tech entrepreneurs.
How many companies came to Chile back then?
In my batch, I was batch number 5. I think we were around 30 companies, and that program is still going. So it's been a lot of different companies, and I think that program has been quite successful for the country as well as for many of the startups there.
It's really, really big. I mean, I remember 2010, it was big, 2011. I remember Vivek Wadhwa was sort of promoting it heavily in the US. Do you think this kind of programs are beneficial for other countries as well?
It was life-changing for us for different reasons. One is because our market was Spanish-speaking countries. So we started in Spain, but our biggest TAM was in Latam. So being here in Chile gave me the opportunity to understand that type of market, adjust, localize our product in terms of currency, different type of Spanish, because it's just very different the way you communicate in Spanish in Spain versus Spanish in different countries of Latin America. The currencies are also very different in every country. The payment methods are different. The way, the tone, the subtitles also are different. So we had to really localize the entire product and learn how to do sales.
When it comes to customer behavior in Latin America, what are the differences you found country to country?
Country to country. Well, let me start from the ones that are more standard. First of all, way less willingness to pay. So
super price sensitive.
Super price sensitive. So we had to adjust our prices in a way that didn't cannibalize prices that we had in other markets. Every country has a different currency. Every country has a different payment method. There was no PayPal at that time. I remember when I was in Santiago, PayPal came and made a big event because they were finally here. So early days, some people who didn't have credit cards. They weren't used to paying online. They would go to supermarkets, buy a prepaid card and use that with a code to then go to a website. So early days, we couldn't assume any of that. Other things related to accent. Some of the video courses that we had didn't resonate well. We had to subtitle them and in some cases redo the audio just to appeal to the different local audiences. And I think there was also subtle things such as communication style. In some countries, it's just harder for people to say no directly, so they would use different vocabulary to try to learn how to read between lines. And in some cases, we started doing some enterprise deals. So there were so many different learnings that I don't think I would have able to acquire without being on the ground. And then that gave me the opportunity to raise capital from 500 startups, startup accelerator in Silicon Valley. So basically, within a year, I finished UC Berkeley, went to Spain, started the company, went to Chile, spent 6 months there, and in less than a year, I was back to Silicon Valley, in this case, as an entrepreneur, with a different type of visa and a little more of capital, which allowed me to afford an immigration attorney and eventually stay here. It's been 13 years now.
Amazing. Let's talk about you evolving as a manager. What kind of manager were you back then and now?
Very different. Took a lot of self-awareness and investment in myself, because my modus operandi, especially when I was in wartime, there was no safety net. We had to make it work. We had to move fast. It was more about building. Like we are in building phase. I am the product, or I am the one who's going to be coding or building the product. And then it gets to a point where I realize I need to scale myself. And now it's not a company of one anymore. Maybe it's a company of 2 or a company of 10. So having that self-awareness to learn how to delegate certain things, how to double down on the things that I love, and truly be okay with not trying to get better at things that I'm never going to be absolutely great. Finding the right team. It's been so many of those learnings, but I would say, going from the builder mindset of like, I have to do everything myself, I need to be the superhero, I need to be the hardest working person in the room, to creating a space for other leaders to thrive and help build something much bigger than myself.
How does your week look like? What are some of the themes of your recruiting meetings?
Well, it has evolved quite a bit. The description, my job description changes almost every year, and it's intentional. I reserve time. In the same way we revisit our 3-year strategy, I also revisit my own job description. And today, I'm married with 2 kids. So that means that I have additional priorities, and that's okay, and I feel good about it. When I was starting my previous company, I used to think that having a partner was a distraction, and that I was never going to get married and I was never going to have kids because I need to make this work, and my identity is so attached to the business that I can't afford to get distracted. Mm-hmm. Obviously that is not true, and I was able to find ways to make it all work because I want to make it all work. I want to be the best version of myself as a dad, as a husband, as well as a CEO, and that means that there are certain things that I have to say no to. So my schedule has shifted quite a bit. I try to organize my time in 3 main themes. One is recruiting. I spend still at least a third of my time focused on recruiting key players for the team, or at least being involved in some of the recruiting process, even if I'm not the hiring manager. And part of recruiting is also includes org chart. I look at my org chart as a product, and it evolves. So trying to manage communication and find opportunities to not just get stuck is something that I love, and I think I'm good at. Mm-hmm. The other part to me is product. This is product school. I'm a product person. I love it, and I think I'm good at helping the product team shape their vision. This is not my own vision anymore, and I'm fully aware of that, and that's why we grew up a team, and I still want to be involved in those decisions, and I think I can bring some value by connecting with other product leaders that I know, by understanding some of the trends that are happening in the space. So I spend, I would say, another third of my time in the product phase, although I'm not coding anymore. I have a much bigger and better team doing that. And then the third part, if I had to split it in 2, one is what I would call culture. Is not recruiting new talent, is taking care of existing talent. And there's a lot of things that go into that, right? Because hiring someone great is just the first step. How are you going to onboard that person? How are you going to ensure that this person is going to be the best version of themselves? And honestly, even though I work in product and all of that, the biggest challenges are always people, not product. So I try to carve some time and have enough focus on that. And then the last piece is what I call miscellaneous. There are some daily fires that I can't anticipate. And there's also some time that I want to reserve because I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't want to pack my agenda to a point that I cannot think. Part of my responsibilities is to think about the future and provide some of those insights, not just for the product team, but for the entire company. So spending time with things that I love, such as talking to mentors with the board, participating in podcasts, and being that type of ambassador that can also take some of those insights back to the company is something that I want to keep as we grow.
You've been running a fully remote company for quite some time. Maybe could you share some of the processes you have? How do you create digital artifacts? I mean, what happens when you're offline? Things are easy. You just tap someone on the shoulder, you get a problem solved. What are some of the things you learned along the way?
Mm-hmm. Well, I had to work remotely because I had no other option. And we've been doing this for a long time, before it was cool. Mm-hmm. So as an immigrant, I knew that there's a lot of amazing talent in Spain that is less expensive and in some cases better than talent I could find in other parts of the world or in the US. So I was always very used to working across time zones, which that is one of the advantages. The disadvantage is the time overlap. So I had to shift my schedule and make sure that I could have enough time to check out with them or to check in. So for example, here in California, my mornings, first 3 hours of the day, pretty much try to allocate them to cover what's going on in Europe. And then as we move into the afternoon, I just have more time for covering what's going on in the US and Latin America. And that has also been part of the culture for other team members. Today we're over 100 people. And there are so many behaviors that are already there that make it easier for anyone to join. Obviously, I don't want to take anything for granted. There is definitely an onboarding process, and there are certain tools and certain behaviors that need to be explained so people understand how to fully participate and make the most out of this opportunity. But I don't see ourselves going back to the office. Like, the team is so distributed and it's working relatively well that I would love to continue finding ways to keep a strong remote culture as we scale.
What weekly recurring meetings do you personally participate in?
Well, I have weekly one-on-ones with my executive team. Mm-hmm. I have a talent meeting. That's mostly the one that we use to review recruiting efforts. Mm-hmm. And people, part of culture, like what's going on with other people. So it's a very important meeting. I have a revenue meeting that is also pretty important. It involves some executives as well as some people who are on the sales and marketing product team. And then have a product meeting. So those tend to be like talent, revenue, product, basically people, product, profit are the three themes that I still very involved in addition to my weekly one-on-ones. And then I have more flexibility on my agenda for things that could come up, as well as interviews with some of the candidates that we are trying to recruit.
You mentioned before the interview that you're preparing for a board meeting at this point. Do you have them on a quarterly basis, and what's your typical prep?
Yeah, that's actually been one of the advantages of raising capital. Gave us additional accountability. And I always tell the team, this board meeting is not for the board, it's for us.
Yeah, it's a learning tool.
It's a learning tool. Yeah. And it's not for us because we own the majority of the business and everybody here to follow. No, it's for us because we are doing this to ourselves. We don't need to manufacture a metric that is going up and to the right.
Adjusted EBITDA.
Right? No adjusted EBITDA. No fake hockey sticks.
Not community conscious EBITDA.
And it's funny we say that, especially at a WeWork. But it's true. Like, and with that in mind, I like to get the financials part out of the way as early as possible. So we have a pre-board meeting with our investor and our CFO to give them a heads up, to not catch anyone off guard. And we also have touch points in between board meetings, but still it's important to make sure that they fully understand the financials. So when we go into the board meeting, we can use it for the future. I want to use this meeting to test some of my hypotheses, to get feedback, to be called out on certain blind spots, not to give another update about what happened 4 months ago. That is important, but that shouldn't be the priority of our board. If I'm trying to do the board for myself and like thinking, what do I need to learn? How can they help me? Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, once the financial part is done, I try to be very product heavy and very revenue, right? To me, product and revenue needs to be very integrated. It's not about you build a product because somehow someone will pay for it. You build a product because hopefully enough people love it and eventually pay for it. So I like to spend enough time talking about product and the vision and our roadmap and show what we're building and why and get feedback. I also like to do the same with revenue and go through the pipeline and discuss some of the big deals and opportunities and how we can continue growing the business. And I like to make this collaborative. So in our board, we have 5 seats. 3 of them belong to the company. So it's my COO and my CPO with me. Also, I like to involve different members of the executive team at different points. So I think it's important for them to learn what's going on, even if they don't have a seat. We never get to a point where we vote for a decision to be made. My chief of staff is always there as well. And then we have our investor who brings an observer, her principal. And then we have two more people. One of it's an independent board member. He's the co-founder of a company called UserZoom that was recently acquired by User Testing. It's the largest UX platform in the world. And he is an amazing CEO who bootstrapped a business for the longest time, went through 3 rounds of private equity, achieved a unicorn valuation, and I hope eventually can take the company public. Well, User Testing was public. Private equity that acquired it brought it private, but eventually I can imagine that we're going to go. But so it's a journey that I admire and I want to learn from. And having that CEO in the room that can give me his true perspective, not just as an investor, but as someone who's been there, is really critical. And then we have an observer whose name is AJ. He's the SVP of product at Disney. He oversees Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN, the digital services of Disney. And he's the product leader. He's the product executive that also brings that perspective from of the user. So having a product executive that I admire, having a CEO that I admire, and then also having an investor that I admire and also is an expert in education is really, really helpful to me. So I try to make this a high-functioning board where we discuss the future, not so much use it to review the past.
Wonderful, wonderful. One of the sections we have in the program is called Top 3, where the guest recommends his favorite books, documentaries, movies, and so forth. Let's start from books. What are some of your favorite books?
I would say 2 for different reasons. One is Hard Thing About Hard Things from Ben Horowitz. I liked it because
he wrote it and actually published it the same year you started Product School, 2014.
Yeah, and that shaped my thinking because he's a former product manager turned CEO turned investor. So some of the topics that he discusses are very specific, condensed, and practical. And I love that. And sometimes I have some of the bookmarks and then I go back on how to hire someone, how to negotiate a comp, how to do certain things that he's lived. And I think was very inspiring to me. And the other book is called Connect. And this was written by one of my coaches. Her name is Carol Robin. She's a legendary professor at the Stanford MBA program, created a course called Interpersonal Dynamics. Some people call it touchy-feely. And she talks about how to really create a healthy environment for your teams where you can be vulnerable and create a safe space so others can participate, and how to discuss some of the people situations that always are underneath any product or technology situation. So those 2 books have been very important to me in my career.
Mm-hmm. As a CEO, it's hard to be vulnerable with your team. So do you have a CEO coach, executive coach? Do you have? I noticed that you're part of YPO. They have a monthly sort of retreats where they provide the support to each other, where they can discuss, where CEOs can discuss CEO problems with other CEOs. What's been helpful to you to grow as a CEO?
Yes, I'm part of 2 CEO communities. One is called YPO, the other one is called Leaders in Tech. That's where I met Carol Robin. Mm-hmm. And those 2 communities were transformational because as CEOs, that doesn't mean that you
it's a very lonely job.
And it doesn't mean that you can't keep learning. I'm obsessed with learning, and I'm obsessed with being an accelerator for others. I don't want to be a bottleneck. And having those safe spaces where I can share with other CEOs, help each other out in a real way, in a deep way. You can share some of the things that are hard to share otherwise. It's been very helpful. I actually came from a 2-day leadership retreat organized by YPO, and that was transformational. And I also sent some of my executives to similar retreats, as well as I like to host our own executive retreat twice a year. It's something critical. I think not just because we're an education company, but because I deeply believe in investing in ourselves and being the best version of ourselves. Coaching, training, peer groups, you pick your poison, but I think it's important to allocate time for learning.
Very cool. Your favorite movies?
when we're talking about this off camera, I noticed that I can't pay attention to movies anymore. Just too long for me. So I need to go back to the past to see what that would be some of the movies that really marked me. But I would say some TV shows. I'm more into that. And so I've been watching Billions, and I've been watching Succession. And it's funny because in a way those are business TV shows, and they take me to a slightly different reality. When I see those situations being exposed in TV, I'm thinking, oh my God, like this is a lot, right? There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in different companies for different reasons. So I find it funny and not so funny at the same time. So those two were helpful to me. And some of the new startup TV shows or documentaries, such as the one they did about WeWork or the one they did about Uber, were very interesting for me.
Mm-hmm. Talking about Billions, do you think it's helpful to have a therapist in a company?
I found a lot of value in getting help from therapists, coaches, and peer groups. For what's worth, I don't know if that means that person has to be a full-time employee of the company, or in a TV show everything can be magnified. But personally, I find a lot of value in having thought partners that can push me and can feel safe enough to know that I don't have all the answers, and they can challenge me in different ways, and I can also disagree and commit. So I personally I do therapy, I do coaching, and I do peer coaching with other CEOs. I also like to take trainings. I'm currently taking a course on AI for CEOs. So I always encourage people to try. I don't think there is any downside in learning.
CEOs you admire, founders, CEOs you admire, entrepreneurs.
I'm going to give you some that are not famous. Mm-hmm. Because I think with these famous figures, everything can be misinterpreted sometimes. And some of them, I don't get to know them enough to realize if I admire or not. One that I deeply admire, he's actually not a CEO, he's a GM of a company called Natera and healthcare here in Silicon Valley. Solid person. His name is Solomon Moscovich. He joined the company very early and in a very entry-level title. And he was able to navigate the org with empathy and determination to earn the respect of others and eventually run entire business unit for a company that eventually went public. And I got to know him along the way. He was an official mentor to me in some of the cases I was trying to figure out, sales, enterprise sales, or marketing and things like that. And I love those stories that might never make it to the press, but are extremely impactful to me. There are other people in my CEO peer group that I deeply admire. And some of them have bigger companies, some of them have smaller companies. One thing I learned in those type of experiences is to demystify company valuation. So at the end of the day, I cry, and I've seen others cry, and there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of these situations that we discuss, yes, might have a different impact depending on the size of your company, but they are not that different. So I like to, admire is a big word, and I definitely like to admire and learn from others, and I also like to have a big enough portfolio of people that I can admire and learn from, so I can also create my own person.
Mm-hmm. Your favorite podcasts?
I'm into podcasts. I have different, very alternative taste, I would say, because the same way I like to watch business TV shows, I don't like to listen to business podcasts. I like the one, I listen to Joe Rogan podcast. He brings a lot of fighters to the show. I like to see them explain themselves and learn about their journeys. I also like to see the Full Send podcast. It's a bunch of YouTubers bringing incredible guests to the show. Sometimes it's Elon Musk, former president of the US, or hip hop artists. I find it as a way to decompress and see that there is another reality, and there are always some parallels. So those
do you put it on your TV? Do you watch it with your family or
I watch them on YouTube.
On YouTube.
So I watch
on your phone.
podcast. Yes. Just listening to them doesn't work. I like to see them interact. And it's funny because YouTube wasn't thought for that, but now YouTube is becoming a huge podcast platform. And I also host my own podcast. So I'm always looking for opportunities to learn and bring some of that to my own experience.
What are some of your favorite questions which you ask to your podcast guests?
Oh, are you going to ask me those questions?
No, I'm like the same way you're learning from podcasters, I'm learning from you.
Yes.
Maybe some of the questions I can adopt to my repertoire, my arsenal.
Well, I like to go deep as quickly as possible. Obviously, I like to warm them up so they can feel comfortable, but I try to avoid a sales pitch or a classic answer where they feel super comfortable and ready to give me, or maybe they gave into another podcast. So I try to go more into the personal aspect of how did you feel when you had to make this type of tough decision? Guide me through that process. What is the hard thing about that hard thing? And talk to me about some of the things that you would have done differently. So I'm trying to go to things that I'm personally curious about. I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable by any means, but at the same time, I don't want the podcast to be another fluffy show when someone can pitch their new book or their new product.
Right. What's your strategy when it comes to when it comes to the selection of your first question you ask? Because in a podcast, you want to, on one end, it's natural to have a small talk just to warm up your guest. On the other hand, you want to capture your audience's imagination with your first question.
So I evolved a lot because I had no idea about how to interview people or do a podcast. I started 5 years ago, and now we've had amazing guests. In our case, it's called a product podcast, so we like to host CPOs at some of the largest companies, as well as CEOs of companies that are building for product managers. At the beginning, I like to ask them about their journey, a little bit similar to what you did with me. And I don't like to have a very fixed script. I like to prep. I learned that it's very important for me to prep, to come ready and have the option to take the conversation to places where maybe the other person doesn't expect. But I also like to keep it flexible. So if I see the opportunity to double down on something, I go for it. And ultimately, this is a podcast for myself. Sure, I love for the audience to enjoy it, but I'm here as a learner. So I'm asking the genuine questions that I want to learn about as well.
100%. Same for me as well. I mean, the moment it starts being fun, then we all podcasts quit. Your favorite restaurants in San Francisco Bay Area?
My favorite restaurants? Well, now I moved from the city to Marine, but in the city, there was this Italian place next to the co-working space where I started. That was a relatively fancy place.
Nostalgic.
Yeah, and every time I wanted to wine and dine a prospective speaker or instructor, I would take them there. It's called Perbaco, with 2 C's, in the financial district next to Jackson Square.
Anything else comes to mind apart from this?
Well, now where I live,
the spots where you like to visit.
I love this place here in Tiburon called Sam's.
Sam's.
It's a beautiful terrace that gives me a lot of peace because San Francisco is very foggy. It's a microclimate. It has a lot of. San Francisco is one, I absolutely love it. But the climate is one of the things that I don't love. However, when you leave the city, either north, east, or south, then you realize that, oh my God, there are seasons and it's a different weather. So where we live right now in Marine, it's this beautiful restaurant by the water called Sam's, and I always like to have a lobster roll. That's their signature sandwich. And I realized that having lunch with family or with friends in a place that gives me peace is very important to acquire clarity. I can't eat a sandwich in front of my screen. I've done it and I'll do it if needed, but it helps me to put a block on the calendar to focus on one thing at a time.
I assume San Francisco is a favorite city to live, but when it comes to favorite cities to visit, what are those?
Madrid. That's the city I'm from and absolutely love, and I try to go there at least 3 times a year. I still have a lot of family and team members there. It's always a good opportunity. And then in Turkey, I love
Antalya?
I love Antalya is beautiful. Istanbul is majestic. Bodrum in the south of Turkey by the Mediterranean is fantastic. I try to show my kids there's another reality, and every time I travel, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to travel, and I'm always very interested in doing another trip. I think traveling is something very important to me. I always try to find time for it. Not always easy, especially with kids, but at least I do my 2 or 3 trips to Spain a year, and if I can connect with another city in between, that's great.
What are some of your hobbies outside of your work?
I play a lot of tennis. I absolutely love it. Play at least 3-4 times per week.
Incredible. Who are your partners?
Many players are here in the area. Many of them are in tech, CEOs and investors, but there's also a lot of other people, attorneys, doctors, anyone really, and just brings my competitive edge. It allows me to have peace of mind, because when I'm playing tennis, I can focus on one thing that is not work, and it also allows me to be competitive with myself and try to get better. It's a very mental, frustrating game in a way. So I used a lot of tennis as a mental health at these days.
What time of day do you typically play?
So I negotiated with my wife those days. My calendar is pretty structured, and in order to be able to be the best version of myself for my family and for my kids, and for the team. So I play once a week, Tuesdays in the evening at 6 p.m. and then try to play twice a week on weekends during nap time while the rest of the family is sleeping at 1:30 p.m. So those are my 3 blocks of the week. If I can squeeze in something else in between, that's great. If not, that's fine as well. And I also like to work out. I have a Peloton bike at home. Nice. Try to wake up relatively early in the morning, the days that I don't play tennis, and get going before the rest of the family wakes up. I found working out, doing any type of physical activity, a fantastic way for me to stay focused and to get energy. I'm a high energy type of person, and when I release some of that energy playing sports, I just become a better CEO and a better husband or dad.
I know that apart from tennis, you also like watching UFC and boxing. Who are your top 3 athletes?
Oh, yes. And I like to watch. I don't practice MMA. I think it's too risky. But there's something very primal about that. And for some reason, I follow that sport. Many athletes. So I admire Golovkin from Kazakhstan. My wife is from Kazakhstan, and I've been following him for a long time. I admire his composure outside the ring, how he can be a beast in the ring and still a gentleman outside and not need to trash talk or disrespect others. So I admire that from that perspective. In the UFC world, there are many. One that I've been following more closely these days is called Israel Adesanya. And the reason why is not only because he's an incredible athlete, it's because he's an incredible entertainer. A lot of these athletes are becoming entertainers as well, and they host on YouTube channels or participate in different podcasts. They create their own brands, food, apparel. So I'm very interested in seeing how they can elevate their own brand and do it in a way that attracts more users to their own community, because at the end of the day, a lot of their incentive is pay-per-views, right? So fighters these days not only have to be great fighters, they also have to be great promoters.
Mm-hmm. Your favorite tennis player?
Oh, I have to go with Rafa Nadal, because I grew up watching him, and Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, he's amazing these days. Your career dream outside of product school?
My career dream outside product school. You know, I literally did a visualization exercise yesterday as part of this CEO retreat, and I had this visual of me branching out of business into sports and politics, because I think business is a very important part of my life, but not the only one. And I want to be able to make an even bigger impact and help as many people as possible. And I think that sports, especially in Spain, has an incredible influence over the way people live. And I think that can be a force for good. So I would love to figure out a way to have a bigger impact beyond business and give back, because at the end of the day, we are only going to hear for a very short period of time, and helping us, and it gets to a point where you accumulate enough wealth where the game is not to get wealthier. Sure, that can be the game for some people, but that's not my end game. And I don't know how yet. I'm still not there yet by any means, but I definitely want to do it.
Are you thinking a sports club or a national sports program? Any?
I don't know yet. I want to be the biggest possible tables, influencing the biggest possible decisions, and trying to help as many people as possible.
Across sports and politics in Spain or all around the world?
Hopefully around the world, but if I had to pick an angle, I think doing it in a country or in a sport that I'm more familiar with can be more impactful.
Got it. Very, very cool. Thank you so much, Carlos. This was an amazing discussion. At the end of the program, we have, let's do two things. Number one, your final, your parting words, your final words of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs in education or entrepreneurs in general. That will be question number one. And question number two, your question to the audience. And then we'll pick the author of the best comment, and we'll reward him somehow. Yeah.
Well, if I had to, giving advice is always very tricky, right? Because what worked for me might not work for others. So I just speak from my own perspective. I have never ever had an overnight success in anything. I would love to, but I think some of these podcast interviews or article features and whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, it's just a nice validation and a little bit of an ego check, but not the ultimate play. And there's definitely not replacement for hard work and a lot of the dirty things that needs to be done behind the scenes to hustle and keep pushing. And even after this podcast interview, I'm going back to my desk to keep pushing. You know, my life is not getting interviews in podcasts. So I think that is also a good reminder to realize that I'm not done yet. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of people that I hope they can take this as a positive message of inspiration and validation that there is no replacement. At least I haven't been able to replace hard work. Mm-hmm. A question that I maybe would like to ask the audience is, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. And if someone is thinking about something specific that I can help them with, I'm just another person. So they can reach out to me, especially on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to find me and send me a message. And if they mention this podcast, I'll definitely make sure to get back to them as soon as possible.
Wow, we never had this question before. That's amazing. How can Carlos help you? How can Carlos help? That's amazing. Thank you, Carlos. This was nFactorial podcast. Be so good they cannot ignore you.